I didn't mean to click on that chapter again. Chapter 6, King. On the night after the day Owlie visited, Jack headed to the harbour as the card instructed. In a rare show of sobriety, he hadn't had a drop of booze. He realised at some point that he was being followed. Just as well, he knew it was someone acting on behalf of Enrique. Like, it doesn't really make sense, but okay. Don't worry, he yelled as he stopped and turned around. I ain't gonna run or hide from this. No one answered. What a boring fella you are. Turning back around, Jack continued on. That night was a dark one, with neither moon... It's like all the sentences are too short. Huh. I know I usually complain they're too long. Oh, I just need a nice in between, please. That night was a dark one, with neither moonlight nor a single star piercing the cloud-shrouded sky. Jack only had the road lamps to guide him as he meandered through the empty streets, and as he did, memories of the grand match between him and King flooded back. I mean, like, the story's alright, it's just the writing. Or translation, I guess. King's legendary skills had earned him his nickname to match. He had been both Jack's teacher and his greatest rival. 7 years ago, Jack and King had played the game of their lives. It was Jack who found himself the winner. Their game was used by the privileged in the underworld of the... What? Their game was used by the privileged in the underworld of the Republic to decide the outcome of a struggle for power. It's like they've translated it too literally from the Japanese without turning it into English syntax that's easy to read. They've like kept the same word order because in Japanese, the word order is changed depending on where the emphasis is, which we do in English as well, but to a lesser extent. So they will have like these really long like noun phrases at the beginning of a sentence, which in English we try to avoid because it's too hard to remember all that information while then reading the rest of the sentence. Yeah. Anyway. Their game. What game? What are you talking about? Their what game? That game? Not their... Okay, whatever, sorry. Their game was used by the privileged in the underworld. Like, I would say the game they used... No, the game they played, or that game was used by... Or not even that. I don't even know what I'd say. It's just hard to read, you guys. By the privileged in the underworld of the Republic to decide the outcome of a struggle for power. I would say, like, to decide the outcome of a struggle for power... That game, oh no, maybe even that's weird. I don't know. It's just, there's something. Anyway, King, forced to take responsibility for losing, was killed. Oh, hello. My phone wants to tell me a thing. Hello, my phone. Can you shush, please? Thank you. Though indirect, it could not be denied that Jack's win had been King's ultimate loss. So, to decide the outcome of a struggle for power, people play cards, I guess. Okay. Around an hour after leaving the bar, he reached the harbour. Around an hour after leaving the bar, Jack reached the harbour. We have to specify who it is because it's a new paragraph and we haven't talked... And sorry, okay. The smell of refuse... It's easier to read. The smell of refuse and brine wafted in on a warm breeze. An enormous boat was floating on the dark night sea just ahead, waves lapping quietly at its sides. See, now that sentence was good. Its hull was painted a solid black, making it almost impossible to see. It was the same boat Jack and King had been on for that final, fateful game. As Jack approached the gangway, he was met by a small silhouette from the shadows. Owlie. Welcome, Victory Jack, she said. I really didn't think you would come all the way out here on your own 2 feet. I have to admit, you've got courage. Normally, Jack might have had a joke or a comeback, but tonight, alone, he was a different man. See, you need a comma here, because otherwise you're saying, but tonight alone. Oh, maybe you're saying, but tonight alone. Like, but just tonight, but just for tonight, but tonight alone, he was... Okay, alright, fine. Glancing at Owlie, he boarded the ship without a word. The light from the portal shone blue, glinting off his eyes as he passed. The sound of the steam whistle was swallowed by the lonely darkness, and slowly the ship slipped free from the harbour and out to sea. I didn't mean to click this one again. Let's do one more for this episode. Chapter 7, The Banquet of Darkness. The ship was utterly silent as it cut through the velvety darkness of the night. In contrast to the stillness and inky black of the outside, one layer down the ship's interior was filled with light and sound. Furnishings from every part of the continent adorned the walls. Adorned the walls? And a band of musicians played a cheery song. The orbital glow of a chandelier imported from Libil shone down on every form of human desire. In the hall built at the center of the ship, guests laughed and chatted. They appeared to be the finest of ladies and gentlemen, but each and every one were a part of the seedy Republican underworld. They were the type of folk that spoke of murder as easily as one would dinner or a fine wine. Their faces hadn't changed much in 7 years. The farthest depths of the hall reserved discreet seating for the highest ranked of the... Oh my fucking god, this is so hard to read. The farthest depths of the hall reserved discreet seating for the highest ranked of the lot. And just like before, there was a certain group of men there. One old man, who was flanked by several bodyguards, stood out in particular. Chief Minister Shamrock. He happened to be the host of the party aboard the ship. A long white beard trailed down his chest. Ugh. It was his symbol, and also the symbol of power, NOCTE. Though he retired several years before, he continued to serve in an advisory role to many organizations. Retirement had done nothing to slow his influence on the nation. He was a man well worthy of being called the monster of the underworld. Of the underworld. Every time they say underworld, I just think of Moulin Rouge. It's like the women of the underworld or whatever. I don't remember what the line is in the movie. Ow. Oh no, it's Beauties of the or Treasures of the Underworld or something. Christian's talking about what Moulin Rouge is. Chief Minister Shamrock held this party once every year as a place for the powerful to meet and share useful information. Of course, there were many in the group who could hardly be called friendly in their attitude. Two of these such men were Enrique and Juan. Enrique, both 7 years ago and now, was the man behind arranging Jack's fateful gambling matches. Formerly an arms dealer, he had expanded his dealings to smuggling drugs within the Eastern Quarter a decade prior and never looked back. For that, he became a villain on the rise, the best of the new class. Conversely, Juan was a villain whose roots ran deep in the region back to even before the Eastern Quarter. He was the kind of man who ruled from the top, commanding gangs of thugs, punks, and the like. For as long as the two were in the same business, Enrique and Juan had been locked in a vicious territorial dispute. It was a classic tale of new versus old, and neither side yielded or ridged. Is this like the Triad versus the Yakuza or something? Every drop of blood in their attempts to claim dominance was only washed away with more blood. However easy it was to wash away, the constant splattering of blood across pavement did little to bring in the meter for either side. It took 3 years of profitless violence for Enrique to finally propose a solution. Oh, I thought you were going to say he proposed to him. Let's just get married. A one-on-one gambling match between the best of the best. Even cheating was welcome, for it could hardly be called cheating at all if one was never caught in the act. Juan's first instinct was to reject the idea, but even he could see the heavy toll the fighting had taken on his own organization. Surely the only thing keeping him from agreeing was his old-fashioned, stubborn mentality. He was, at his core, a man greatly adverse to change. In order to set his plans in motion, Enrique brought his proposal forward to none other than Chief Minister Shamrock, who also served as advisor to Juan's group. With him having granted the match his blessing, there was little more one could do but accept. This is a very different story to the Cornelius story. Chapter 8, Halle. The clock chimed the 11th hour. The match between Jack and Halle was to start at midnight exactly. She waited in the interim in Enrique's room. Your father became ill and died 7 years ago. That's what the girl had heard from her mother, and yet 3 years ago she learned her father had instead lost his life in a match. I was just going to read one and then Halle didn't have many memories of her father. She spent her childhood with her mother. That was exactly why, though, that each and every one was engraved into her heart as irreplaceable treasures. The things she remembered best were the sights in the gambling dens. She didn't often get to go along, but to her, the way her father could silence even the most finely dressed of gentlemen with his near-magical card handling was something she admired with all her heart. The last memory Owlie had of him was The last memory Owlie had was of him taking her hand while she was in bed and telling her not to worry. Maybe that memory was what kept her from believing what her mother said about her father's death. After all, how could the strong, healthy man from that memory drop dead of illness so suddenly? It was a typical day when she had learned the truth. She was out shopping for her mother, and rather than take the usual route home, she found herself heading to one of the gambling dens along the back streets on a whim. One fateful whim. That was all it took for her to overhear the careless chatter of thugs who spoke of her father. It had been... It had been 7 years, yes, but it was a match of the ages, a match which still ushered in fervent whispers among the men and women who frequented the darker corners of the gambling world. The truth left her with a hatred so all-consuming that she was blind to all but one desire: revenge. Swearing she would become as good as her father, Owlie obsessively frequented the gambling dens and played with that one burning desire guiding her hands. It was Enrique who, upon hearing rumours, approached Owlie first. He had claimed victory in his first match against Juan by betting on Jack. With Owlie, he saw his chance to do so again. Anyone could see that to Owlie. Participating in such a match would be a perfect means to an end. Cutting all ties with her mother was a sad but necessary sacrifice, and though she was young, she was welcomed as the newest addition to Enrique's group. Being blessed with talent to begin with, and having abandoned all else to focus on improving her craft, it took a mere 3 years for her to master what King had spent a lifetime studying. Revenge had proven to be an incredible motivator. Owlie's eyes were distant as she waited quietly for the match. Perhaps those 3 years were running through them. Still seated, she bowed her head and let out a big, long sigh. "No need to let the weight of this drag you down, you know," Enrique said softly to her. "Don't worry," she replied. "Now that I'm here, my heart is as light as a feather." Her face betrayed the lie in her words as a flicker of sorrow creased her features. Before anyone could notice, she was back to the same poker face as before. "Right now, the only thing on my mind is seeing Jack lose." Enrique's lips contorted into a smile. The more confident he grew in his victory, the more disturbingly warped his smile became. "Alright, let's stop this episode here. I'll see you next time on Let's Play Trails with Third Blind. Maybe I'll be able to read a little better then. I keep thinking that Kevin is like a pile of food, but he's not. Bye-bye.